Whistling 5 Anarchic Productions proudly presents Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s stories, as told by Andrew Brammer. Hello and welcome. The story you are about to hear is written and told using its original source materials, scribblings and scratchings from the scrawls of Stumpy, found within Stumpy Sanderson's time capsule, which was buried in 1979 and then unearthed in 2019. The story is told in the first person, as I, just like Stumpy, witnessed at first hand the momentous events which it recounts. So let's park up our rally choppers and tomahawks and take a ride back to 1975 for Dribbling Peter. So it had come to this. Stumpy Sanderson and me sitting squashed into one Keymarket supermarket trolley. Stephen Brookman and little Peter Rogers, also now known as Dribbling Peter, in another. Both trolleys balanced and tilted on the edge of the large and bulbous chalk hill up Blows Downs, which was known to us all as the Bulldog. Many feet below us stood the green canopy of trees, into which we would shortly be pushed and go crashing. Holding the trolleys were two of Kerry O'Keefe's henchmen, just awaiting Boaster Hawkins's command to push us to our fate. How had it come to this? The seeds of our misfortune had first been sown just a couple of weeks earlier, when Stumpy and I had been embroiled in a mouthy standoff with Boaster Hawkins after a kickabout on the school field at lunchtime, in which, once again, Hawkins, as the opposing goalkeeper, had kept yet another clean sheet. As the bell for afternoon lessons had sounded, and we headed off the field, we heard Hawkins, who was surrounded by his usual nodding coterie of sycophants, spew forth his usual and predictable cocksure arrogance. "There's not anyone in this school who could put a goal past me. I could take a kip in the goal area, and still no one would score." The same old boasting and swaggering. We heard it all the time, whether it was about cricket, tennis, high jump, basketball, cross-country. With his tall and imposing figure, and oversized Goliath's head, topped off with greased-back black hair, Boaster Hawkins always made sure everyone knew about his achievements in all the sports in which he excelled. But this latest arrogance was the straw that broke our small camel's back. One boast too many, and it was Stumpy who swung round. "Tell you what, Hawkins, I'll bet you whatever you want that we put one past you in next week's house match." Hawkins roared with laughter. "I admire your optimism, Sanderson." And then, stealing his beady bragger's eyes, "You're on." The terms of the bet, laid down later that day by Stumpy and Hawkins, were a mixture of appealing and onerous. If our house team managed to score past Hawkins, he had agreed he would keep Stumpy and me in supplies of bottles of Cresta and Caramello bars for the rest of the term, and would also give us our maths homework answers for the rest of the year. If, though, we failed to score, we would keep him in packets of John Player specials and Aztec bars for the rest of the term, and would also have to carry his school bag every morning and evening for the rest of the year. The bet had been laid and shook on, as was our normal custom and practice, in front of Kerry O'Keefe, that red-haired arbiter of justice, and our school's most knowledgeable character in matters of playground law, who had sat on his throne of judgment to seal the deal. The throne actually being an old disused Armitage Shanks toilet that was hidden in the trees at the end of the school field. What was also laid down and agreed by both parties was that any skullduggery or unfair practices would be judged by O'Keefe and a jury, who would then decide on a suitable punishment for the offender. So, after the bet had been placed, Stumpy and I knew we had a real problem. This being the fact that our house team's chances of scoring past Hawkins, who had not conceded a goal in lunchtime kickabouts, in games up the Rec, or in house or school matches for 3 years, were next to zero. And particularly bearing in mind that only a couple of us in our team, Stumpy and me, were anywhere near half decent at football, although we were far too small to make any impression on the colossi that would make up our greenhouse opponents. The rest of our team would be comprised of a ragtag and bobtail collection of misfits, misshapes, budding thespians, musicians, and a couple of boys with cotton wool in their ears. We would be lucky to get within 30 yards of their goal, let alone get off any shots at or past Boaster Hawkins. As we pondered this problem behind the bike sheds at lunchtime the next day, the waft of industrially battered fish carrying to us from the food hall, and as we puffed on our Piccadillys, we were joined by Stephen Brookman, that freckle-faced left-wing warped mastermind with swept-back Chairman Mao hair and round-rimmed Trotsky glasses, who was a genius at devising nefarious schemes with which to bring down those whom he considered to be oppressors. Brookman listened to mine and Stumpy's concerns and problem, and, like some communist Sherlock Holmes, pondered our dilemma for some 10 minutes whilst drawing heavily on his pipe, which contained strong and aromatically spiced Soviet tobacco. With a start, Brookman then declared, "I have it! I have the solution! Tomorrow lunchtime we will assemble here and I will explain. And I will be bringing little Peter Rogers along with me, for he will be integral to this plan's success." Stumpy and I were stunned. What masterpiece had Brookman come up with? And why did we need little Peter Rogers? That fair-haired boy with a face like a vole and a voice like a tin whistle, who was even smaller than Stumpy and I, who was absolutely useless at football, and who seemed to spend much of his time outside and between lessons running everywhere, possessing phenomenal whippet-like speed, faster than anything we had ever seen over short distances and at anything like a 50-yard dash or short bursts. This rapidity we had seen many times on the playground, when little Peter would be running around playing weird games with his friends, Gentle Gerald and Dewdrop Dawson, who were then all routinely chased by thugs. Peter, though, with his speedy and slippery shrew-like velocity, easily managed to dodge, weave past, and evade these pursuers. So, the next day, at lunchtime, behind the bike shed, and holding in his hands a red shoebox marked with a yellow hammer and sickle logo, Brookman presented his brainwave to me and Stumpy and little Peter Rogers. "So, gentlemen, this is the plan to bring down that crowing rooster, Boaster Hawkins, humiliate and humble him in front of his teammates and acolytes, and as I have already explained to you, little Peter, give you a place in immortality for which you will be forever shrouded in glory." Little Peter Rogers' smile beamed in anticipation. Stumpy and I wondered just what Brookman had cajoled him with. "Now to the plan," continued Brookman. "I believe we are all fans here of espionage movies, and I can tell you that those shoes worn by Rosa Klebb in the James Bond film From Russia with Love actually exist. Those shoes, from which a pointed spear emerges from the toe of one of the shoes at the click of a button, concealed within that shoe and operated by the wearer's foot. I can tell you that I have a pair of those shoes here, which I actually have had in my possession from some time ago, when I procured them from my usual Soviet sources. That last night I made some adaptations to these shoes to enable the plan to be enacted. At this, Brookman put down his pipe and produced from the shoebox a pair of sinister-looking shoes, and held them out for us to see. They looked astonishing, high-sided and round-toed in sinister black gleaming leather, but with Adidas-type stripes painted on the sides, and, incredibly, football studs attached to the bottom. These had obviously been the adaptations Brookman had made the night before. Smiling, Brookman then put his hand inside the right shoe. We heard a button click, and we all jumped back as a gleaming 3-inch steel spike suddenly shot out from the middle of the toe cap. Stumpy and I were stunned, but little Peter just grinned, clearly having already been shown this device by Brookman. "Incredible," hissed Stumpy. "But how does this help us?" "Aha! This is where little Peter comes in, whom I have already fully briefed, and this is the plan, which we shall call Operation Little Limpet." Stumpy and I then listened in bewilderment as Brookman detailed his extraordinary plan, which was pure genius in its creation. As we heard its development and telling, Stumpy's and my mouths grew ever wider in astonishment. This was genius thinking of the very highest order, and as we covered every aspect of the plot that lunchtime, not even Stumpy and I could see a flaw in the plan's construction. So, 5 days later, early in the second half of the house match, we found ourselves on the heavy and muddy quagmire of a pitch, with knots of hardy spectators watching, including Kerry O'Keefe and his arbiters, and with us already 7-0 down. But Stumpy and I now stood 30 yards out from the greenhouse goal and over the free kick we had just won. Writhing in agony on the floor in the mud after a crunching sandwich foul was Dewdrop Dawson, who was also in on the plan and who had been paid by Brookman to, at the allotted time, insult and goad one of the greenhouse players in order to ensure he was fouled and that we won the free kick, which was crucial to our strategy. Greenhouse set their wall of only 2, as they knew we possessed little threat to their goal. Stumpy muttered, "Look at Hawkins! The arrogance!" And we saw Hawkins's lanky form casually leaning against a goalpost, chatting to a gaggle of girls, completely unfazed by our free kick, which he obviously thought posed absolutely no danger to his goal. How we now wanted to wipe that superior smirk off his face. As Dewdrop Dawson finally hobbled in agony to his feet, a willing pawn and sacrifice in Brookman's great plan, Brookman, who had assumed the mantle of being our manager for this game, shouted out to Mr. Matheson, the referee, "Substitution, please, sir?" And as Dawson hobbled off, little Peter Rogers, spick and span in an ill-fitting kit, and with his very strange-looking and oversized Rosa Klebb-style football boots that had been stuffed with rags to fill them as his feet were far too small for them, entered the field of play, taking his position a couple of yards behind Stumpy and me. Mr. Matheson blew the whistle. Stumpy nudged the ball to me, and I passed it back to little Peter. What happened next has gone down in middle school folklore as the great run of Dribbling Peter. For as soon as he got to the ball, and completely unknown to everyone apart from those of us in on the plan, little Peter Rogers clicked that switch inside his right boot, where, hidden by the ball's form, the spike shot out, piercing the heavy wet brown leather of the ball, ensuring that it stuck to his boot, and then, with the ball attached, little Peter Rogers started to run at phenomenal lightning speed. Oh, how he ran! How he dodged and weaved through that cloying morass of mud as the brutes of Greenhouse tried to get him, to bring him down, to sweep his legs from under him, to crunch him. But he was too small and too fast as, like some supersonic small rodent, he ran round legs, between legs, under legs, over legs, round and round like some demented whirling dervish as those Greenhouse players desperately tried to scythe, smash or sandwich him, but instead fell all around him, some even colliding into each other, no one able to catch him. It was like trying to catch a supersonic wisp of fog. As he darted between the last defenders, the lumbering centre-backs, little Peter, like a bionic and supercharged blue wasp, was now within range of Hawkins, who, breaking off from his chatting with the girls, now saw that something resembling a threat to his goal was approaching. Like some great dark bird-eating spider that has sensed prey approaching, Hawkins's tall form emerged off his goal line, long arms stretched out wide, his Goliath face topped with greased back hair, wearing a superior smirk, and began moving out to meet little Peter. "Go on, little Peter, go past him!" Stumpy and I shouted as the rest of our team looked on in pride and bewilderment. And then, just as Hawkins was advancing, tall and large and bearing down on him, preparing to make a huge smothering dive, little Peter suddenly took a wide course, and too late Hawkins realised his mistake, for as he dived and spread-eagled himself onto the ground, little Peter had run too wide and too fast for him, and was past him, the open goal now beckoning for glory. What happened next showed the fundamental and unplanned fatal flaws in Brookman's plan. Firstly, little Peter had run so wide that he would need to run back to the centre of the goal area in order to ensure his shot was on target. Also, by this stage, he was clearly exhausted, having run so fast for far longer than even he had ever run, and in the heavy swamp-like mud, his stamina was clearly waning by the second, his vim beginning to deflate like a small punctured balloon. Secondly, the plan was that, at the given time, and when he was so close to the goal he couldn't miss, little Peter would press the switch inside the boot, retract the metal spike, and then kick the ball into an empty net. Even though the ball would have a slow puncture, Brookman had calculated that this wouldn't be noticed until the game had restarted, so the goal would be given. What Brookman hadn't counted on, though, was that, due to a faulty Soviet-era mechanism, the spike would choose this moment to not retract, and, as little Peter got nearer to the goal, terrifyingly slowing up, and with Hawkins now rising from the mud, turning and readying himself to make a huge leap and lunge back through the air, and with other defenders now racing back into the area, little Peter's face was visibly panicked as, like a stuck Super Striker tabletop football game player, he stood just 6 yards out from the open goal, swinging his right leg back repeatedly, desperately trying to release and work the failed mechanism. As the gargantuan greenhouse swarm rapidly descended on him, Stumpy and I rushing into the area to try to give support in numbers, the now rapt and astonished spectators on the side looked on in astonishment, Brookman desperately shouting from the touchline, "Mechanism failure! Mechanism failure! Get him out of there!" And as Hawkins went to make his dive on the ball, little Peter gave one final almighty swing, and the ball flew off his foot towards the goal, but with the shoe still attached to the metal spike and to the ball. That heavy brown leather football never actually reached the goal. With all his energy and strength sapped from him due to his heroic run, little Peter's weak and feeble kick, combined with the weight of the shoe itself, the weight of the heavy water-sodden leather ball, and the thick and sludge-like mud in the 6-yard area, caused the ball to stick and settle still 3 yards from the goal line. Although Stumpy managed to get to the stuck ball first and prod it over the line before he disappeared from view beneath a melee of sliding tackles from brutish defenders and Hawkins's diving form, Mr. Matheson, the referee, because he had seen everything that had happened, promptly disallowed the goal and then sent little Peter off. And so, later that week, at our trial presided over by Kerry O'Keefe, sitting on his throne of judgment, although it was acknowledged that technically we had indeed managed to score past Boaster Hawkins, it was judged that because the goal had been disallowed and little Peter Rogers had been sent off, that without doubt we had used foul means with which to gain our advantage. In sombre mood and wearing a black cap, O'Keefe duly passed judgment and sentence for such an undeniably serious offence. And so, 2 days later, the 4 of us, me, Stumpy, Brookman, and poor little Peter Rogers, found ourselves squashed into those bent and buckled Key Market supermarket trolleys, waiting to be launched off the edge of the Bulldog. Thank you for listening to this episode of Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s Stories. And don't forget to listen out for Stumpy and Gang's next adventure. For further information on all things Stumpy Sanderson, please visit www.stumpysanderson.co.uk. And you can also check out the Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s Stories YouTube channel. But before we saddle up again on our rally choppers and tomahawks, let's take a listen to the strange little song that was specially written by Stumpy to accompany this podcast's tale. This song is performed for us now by Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s acoustic archive. Let's rock!
Run! Run! There goes Dribbling Peter, running at the speed of light. They won't catch Dribbling Peter, he'll leave them out of sight. Oh, Dribbling Peter! Oh, Dribbling Peter! Dribble free! Dribble free! Run! Run! There goes Dribbling Peter, running fast and free. Don't stop dribbling, Peter. You need to get home for tea. Dribbling Peter. Dribbling Peter. free. Dribble free. There he goes. Bye-bye, Dribbling Peter. Nice to see you. Thanks for your heroic run. Thanks for your contribution.
Roche Cleb.
Bye-bye, Dribbling Peter. Bye-bye.